One of the biggest threats to a retirement plan is not always the market. Sometimes it's taxes, because if you pull money from the wrong place at the wrong time, you can create a problem that you never saw coming. Today, we are going to talk retirement tax planning, and we're going to do it on the Howdy Neighbor Retirement Show.
It's the Howdy Neighbor Retirement Show.
Howdy neighbor, I'm Michael Andrews with Andrews Insurance and Advisory, and you're listening to the Howdy Neighbor Retirement Show, where we tackle real-life questions about retirement, Medicare, Social Security, investing every week. And today, we are going to do a full-blown Michael tutorial, and we're talking about one of the biggest parts of a good retirement plan, and that is tax planning. How it works, where people get blindsided, and how to keep more of your money. Tax planning matters in retirement because it helps you keep more of your money, it makes it last longer, and it helps you to avoid surprises. A lot of people spend years focused on building the biggest nest egg possible, but what really matters is how much of that money you actually get to keep and use once your retirement starts. For example, there is a guy that I really like. He said this a few years back. He's passed away now, but his name was Tom Gow, and he said investing is often a matter of opinion. So, for example, people can argue all day long about what the best portfolio is, what the best market allocation is, or what the market is going to do next. But taxes are much more of a matter of fact. There is usually a more efficient way and a less efficient way to pull income, manage accounts, and build a retirement paycheck. And if we can dial that in, that becomes one of the most solid parts of your retirement plan. So the first thing that you need to understand is that not all retirement income is taxed the exact same way. Social Security has its own rules. IRAs and 401k withdrawals are generally taxed as ordinary income. Roth withdrawals come out tax-free if you've done it right, and brokerage accounts can be taxed at long-term capital gain rates, which often are much more favorable. That's why two retirees with the exact same amount of money can end up paying very different amounts in taxes, depending on where their money is located and how they draw it out. And if you don't understand those buckets, it's really easy to create a tax problem without even realizing it. One of the first buckets that people need to understand is Social Security, because a lot of folks are shocked to find out that it can be taxable. Depending on what the IRS calls your provisional income, up to 50% of your benefit can become taxable. And once your income gets high enough, up to 85% of it can be taxable. But that does not mean that Social Security is taxed at an 85% rate. All that means is that up to 85% of the benefit gets pulled into the formula for your ordinary income tax bracket. For married couples filing jointly, that threshold is $32,000 of provisional income, and for single filers, it starts at just above $25,000. So if you've got Social Security coming in on top of your IRA withdrawals, pension income, or brokerage income, you can see how the tax picture starts changing fast. That's why we want to look at Social Security as part of the whole plan, not just as a monthly check that magically shows up. The next bucket that people need to understand is tax-deferred money. So these would be things like IRAs, 401ks, different things like that. In most cases, when you pull money out of those accounts, it is taxed as ordinary income. That means that it is stacked right on top of whatever other taxable income you've got coming in and gets taxed at your regular federal income tax rates. If it's Roth money, that's different because qualified Roth withdrawals can come out tax-free. And one more thing that people need to know, if you pull money out of a traditional IRA or 401k before age 59 and a half, there is usually a 10% early withdrawal penalty on top of the regular income tax unless you qualify for an exception. That's why these accounts can be great tools, but they can also create a tax surprise if you're not careful about them and when you use them. So the next bucket that we need to look at is your brokerage account. And this is where people can really gain some flexibility in retirement. If you've owned an investment for more than a year and you sell it for a profit, that profit is usually taxed at a long-term capital gain rate. Long-term capital gain rates are often lower than ordinary income tax rates, so that can make brokerage money very useful in the right situation. Because sometimes you can pull money from a brokerage account much more tax efficiently than you can from an IRA. And depending on your overall taxable income, there are situations where those long-term capital gains can be taxed very favorably. That's why brokerage accounts can be such a helpful tool in retirement, not just because they give you access to money, but because they give you another lever to manage your tax bill. Once you understand these buckets, the next step is figuring out how to pull them in the most efficient way possible. That might mean taking some income from an IRA, some from a brokerage account, and maybe leaving Roth money alone until later, or maybe using Roth money strategically when it makes sense. This is also where Roth Conversions can come into play. A lot of times, the best window to look at converting money from a traditional IRA into a Roth is when your income is temporarily lower, maybe right after you retire, but before your RMDs kick in, or in any stretch where you're in a lower tax bracket than usual. The whole idea is simple. You pay taxes now on that money at a lower rate so that you can pull it out later tax-free. Done right, that can help lower future RMDs, create more tax-free income later, and give you a lot more flexibility when it comes to managing your tax bill in retirement. And that leads right into our required minimum distributions, or RMDs. So once you hit age 73, the government says, okay, time's up. This money has been sitting here tax deferred for too long. We want our money out of it. They need the tax revenue. So the problem is a lot of people have their retirement income plan dialed in at this point. They're pulling what they need, they're comfortable, and then the RMD age shows up. Now they're forced to take out more than they even want. That extra income can push them into a higher tax bracket, and in some cases it can even spill over and increase their Medicare premiums through IRMA. That's why RMD planning matters so much. The goal is not to just avoid taxes today, it's to keep taxes from snowballing later when the government starts forcing money out of those accounts. Another way to reduce the tax bite in retirement is through charitable giving strategies, especially if giving is already something that you want to do anyway. Once you're old enough to do a qualified charitable distribution, you can send money directly from an IRA to a qualified charity. And that amount can count toward your required minimum distribution without showing up in your taxable income, the same way a normal withdrawal would. So that can be a really clean strategy for folks who are charitably inclined and also trying to keep taxable income and Medicare premiums under control. And then there's something called a donor advised fund, which can make sense for people who give regularly and want to bunch several years of giving into one tax year. The basic idea is you make a larger charitable contribution in one year, which may help you itemize and get a bigger deduction that year. And then the money can be granted out to charities over time. The main point is this: if charitable giving is already part of your values, there may be smarter ways to do it than just writing checks here and there with absolutely no strategy behind it. And one more thing that people need to remember is that federal tax planning is not the entire story. State taxes matter also. So as you know, I'm here in Oklahoma and our top state income tax rate is 4.75%. But if you were to cross just south of the red into Texas, it is 0% because Texas does not have a state personal income tax. And if you're listening from somewhere with great weather, like let's say California, you also have to deal with a top state income tax rate that can run as high as 13.3%. That doesn't mean that everybody needs to move, but it does mean where you live can have a real impact on how much of your retirement income that you actually keep. And tax planning matters after you pass away too, especially with IRAs. A surviving spouse usually has the most flexibility, but when those accounts go to a non-spouse beneficiary, the rules can get a lot tighter. And for many beneficiaries, the inherited IRA generally has to be emptied within 10 years. Although there are exceptions, but generally it's 10 years. That's exactly why you need some kind of plan in place, whether that's with you and your advisor or an advisor and an attorney getting together so that the people inheriting the account understand the tax consequences before they make a bad move. Something like pulling the whole thing out all at once and creating a giant tax bill that they have absolutely no need to create. And that's really the whole point about why tax planning matters so much in retirement, because it's not just about what you've saved, it's about how much of it that you actually get to keep. We covered the different buckets of the retirement income, how Social Security, IRAs, Roth accounts, and brokerage accounts are all taxed differently, and how things like Roth Conversions, RMDs, charitable giving, state taxes, and inherited IRAs can play a role in building a smarter retirement paycheck. And if you've got a question that you'd like me to tackle on the show, shoot me an email at michael@andrewsadv.com. I read every single one of them, and I might just answer yours on a future episode. Also, you've worked hard to build your retirement, and you do not have to make these decisions alone. If you want a second opinion on your retirement plan, well, I'm here to help you. It doesn't cost anything for me to take a look, but not letting me, it could cost you thousands. So if you're ready to take this relationship to the next level, you can call or text me at 918-842-7379 or head on over to andrewsadb.com and click on my calendar to schedule a time that works best for you. Before you go, hit subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss next week's episode, and follow the Howdy Neighbor Retirement Show page on Facebook too. If you found this helpful, give it a like, leave a comment, and share it with a friend who could use some good neighborly retirement advice. Thanks again for listening and watching, and we will see you all next week right here on the Howdy Neighbor Retirement Show. Thanks.
It's the Howdy Neighbor Retirement Show, helping you plan so your money will grow. No need to worry, we'll make it clear. Medicare